1 minute.
I gave you all my copies of minutes.
Oh, what?
One copy of minutes.
There, I put all the extras over there by Mark. Mark has them.
I just realized I gave them all to you.
Yeah, I passed them out.
Perfect.
All right. All right. We good? Where'd Jeff go? I don't like starting without our technical guy here. I'm looking forward to the day we can go back to the air center. All right. Jeff, do we have anybody on? We don't normally get anybody, do we? All right. All right. It's 10 o'clock. I'll call the July 25th meeting of the Airport Advisory Commission to order. I don't think, Walt, you can figure out who's here, right?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda. I have a motion by Commissioner Kunkel to approve the agenda with a second by Councilor Armstrong.
If I could state, I don't know if this is important,
June 25th. Thank you, sir. It is critical. And let's don't get ahead of myself. It is the June 25th meeting we called to order, and it would be the agenda for the June 25th meeting. Motion by Commissioner Kunkel and second by Commissioner Armstrong. Any other comments or questions or discussion on the agenda? Hearing none, I'll call for a voice vote. All those in favor of the agenda as presented, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say nay. Okay. Next up is approval of the minutes from Thursday, May 21st. I'll entertain a motion. I have a motion by Commissioner Armstrong and a second by Commissioner Burris to approve the minutes from Thursday, May 21st, 2020. Any discussion on these? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor of approving the minutes as presented signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say nay. All right. I should make a note, I guess, for the record, it's already in there, that Commissioner Call is not able to attend. But without further ado, non-action items. Item number 5, Mr. Stark.
Good morning, Commissioners, Mr. Mayor. I'll start with the event that we had on Tuesday night. We had a windstorm come through and did some damage to the airport. The biggest thing is the roof on Hangar 91, bays A and B, came completely off and wound up on the taxiway and the access road and the ramp. That's all been cleaned up now, but we're in the process of going through insurance and getting emergency repairs possibly done and getting that roof replaced. We did also have some minor damage to hangars 1536 with that flight, and hangar 85 also had a little piece of trim come off on the top of the doghouse. There may still be some other reports to come in later. At this point, that's all we really know about. We had 2 United aircraft, one of them weather vane in the wind and bumped another one. Doesn't look like the damage is very major, but that's damage to the aircraft that are stored out there. We had one helicopter that was on the ramp that weather vaned as well, but there was nothing around it, so it just turned. No damage there. The most interesting thing was that our aircraft boarding ramp that sits in front of the terminal wound up a mile away on the other side of the airport over near the drag strip. And it is basically undamaged. It has some minor damage to it, but it rolled on its wheels all the way over there without falling over or anything else, and finally got stopped in a drainage ditch. So we retrieved that yesterday. It was quite exciting, but just unbelievable how it got all the way over there to begin with, and secondarily how it happened without really any damage. There's a couple of tabs on the ramp that hold it up that are bent a little bit, and we'll straighten that out if it hasn't already been done. So we heard a couple of reports. I heard from indirectly from the control tower that it was 58 knots sustained. I don't know what the gusts were. And then one of the construction companies that out there working on Sky reported that their crane anemometer registered 118. And of course, that's typical to have a different reading in different places, especially if you're up close to a building, because it's going to hit that building and accelerate
like
as
that.
it turns. But that's not too unusual to have different readings other places. The anemometer on the ASOS that reads it for the control tower is out isolated away from everything, so it doesn't have anything interfering. So that's probably closer to the true reading of what we had. Second thing, air service. I know everybody's always interested in that as we go through this pandemic. There's been a little bit of a change. We have picked up a few passengers over what we did have. We're not 90% down now, but we're probably still 75% down would be my guess. We do have good days where the plane's almost full, but I would say overall that we're probably still 75% down, just watching the crowds go through the terminal. We still are only operating the one flight that remains overnight. It comes in at 3:30 in the afternoon, leaves at 8:30-ish in the morning, going to Dallas. The schedule will change on July 7th, and that run flight will change that day, and they will add back a 12:25 DFW departure. I'm sorry, a 9:30 arrival in DFW, 12:25 departure in the middle of the day to that on the 9th. Phoenix is still on hold. The word I get from American is that they're concentrating because of revenue on DFW flights and Charlotte flights because those are their two biggest hubs. They're mostly ignoring everything else in terms of getting things back in the air. They're trying to get things back in the air that connect to Dallas and Charlotte. So it'll be a little longer for Phoenix. If you look on AA.com, you'll see Phoenix still there for August. It doesn't mean it, just like July, it doesn't mean it'll be there when we get to August. It probably will change sometime next month, or they'll decide that, yep, we're doing it. So we won't really know anything until then. It's pretty much fluid at this point. I handed out a announcement to everybody on the NMAE STEM event. That has been canceled for this year due to the COVID pandemic. Bill Shewart talks in that note that you guys have about the reasons, and basically it's the unsurety of everything that's going on with the pandemic, with the public health order, the lack of being able to do a mass gathering, the social distancing. It leaves an awful lot of question marks that you can't plan an event with those things still existing. So it was wise on their part to cancel it now rather than try to run all the way up to the end and incur expenses on deposits and those type of things, and then we'll reboot next year. And that's unfortunate, but it's just where we are with most everything that's a public gathering. Airliner parking, it seems that the number is holding steady around 470 on the airport now. We're losing a few. Frontier has begun to put their aircraft back into service, so we've seen, I'd say probably, Mark, wouldn't you say about 10 to 15 of them have left by now? And in the end, we're going to wind up with somewhere around 5 of them left that will not go back into service. They'll be in permanent long-term storage for sale, for tear down, or whatever happens to those. but the rest of them will go back into service, and Frontier has begun that. It runs about 3 to 5 a week is going back into service now. The other side of that story is that number may still hold for a while. We still have a lot of interest in folks bringing things here. We have gotten some interest from other airliners that are international, that are overseas, bringing in some 777s, up to around 15 to 30 of them. We don't know that number exactly yet, and maybe some A350s, some Boeing Dreamliners, and then a lot of other random things that will probably happen. We won't know till those things do happen. We still have room for somewhere in the neighborhood of 200, depending on how many of the big ones we get.
Scott, what's the largest number that you've had stored out there?
We're at it. Before this, it was the influx from 9/11, and we had probably about 350 then, and we've been up to around 375, 380, and then that number's come off a little bit with the Frontier returning back to service. So yeah, we're pretty much at where the highest number we've ever been.
Okay.
And again, we do expect that to go a little higher, but as the airlines start putting airplanes back to work, you'll see some of the 737s go for United and for American both. But nobody knows what this still looks like. They got a better idea now that they're starting to put things back into service. The airlines are returning their routes to service quicker than they expected to, especially American. So I expect we'll see some of those go in the next few months, but we'll continue to see an influx of others that haven't found a permanent home yet. And the last thing I have on my list is we've had some drastic staffing changes at the Air Center. As you noticed, Evangeline is not here this month. Her last day was the beginning of this month. I want to say it was the 2nd, I think, but I forget the date, but it was earlier on in this month. And so she's gone. Walt will be retiring at the end of next month, and next week on the 2nd is Mark's last day. So if you know anybody who needs a good job, I got a couple open. And with that, I'll toss the ball to Mark and let him do his
thank you, and I'd like to thank everyone for the opportunity of participating in the Air Center for the last few years. I will be leaving. My real estate license has been reactivated, and I'll be working with Berkshire Hathaway locally here. So I'm not leaving the area. I'll be focused on commercial industrial development, hopefully at the Air Center and in that southern corridor, but homes as well. I'm going to defer some of my time. There was we had on the schedule, we took it off as an agenda item by itself, but I did want to introduce Isaac Sheets from General Airframe Support in regards to the crunch pad conversation that we've had. You could come over here real quick.
Thanks for having me, guys. I'm Isaac Sheets, the owner of General Airframe Support. I did turn in a letter of intent to create or build a scrap pad out on the airport. We're going to be leasing 6 acres. Our timeline is to have it done by the end of this year, December. I'm hoping to have it done closer to October, November. But I just wanted to come today, see if you guys had any questions or concerns. We are working with all the vendors and clients that you guys have out on the airport now to make sure we take good care of them and give them options, so we just don't have one company supplying that service out there. But didn't know if you guys, I just came today to see if you guys had any questions, concerns, or anything like that.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
Isaac, is this just for General Air Services use, this pad?
Yeah, we're actually going to be subcontracting or using custom construction to do the scrap metal. I don't have any intentions on actually doing the crushing and the selling of the metal. I just wanted to make sure we had some options out there. We recently sold an aircraft to one of the client vendors out there and got 0 for an MD-80, no money returned. Custom construction gives me about $8,200 for that aircraft, so As Aircell's closing down their crush pad, we plan on supplying them an option and anyone else some good return on their metal. We don't want anybody to get stuck with losing out on making some kind of return on that metal. But really, it's quite a larger investment than I thought. I'll make about $2,000 an aircraft. So the return on investment is going to be very slow for me. We plan on doing about 100 aircraft a year. The cost is north of $800,000 for us to do it. And yeah, so it's going to take at least 5 years for us to recoup our money, but I just want to make sure we have options for our clients and we really, take care of our vendors out there.
I thought we had estimated costs of around $500,000.
Well, originally I was verbally told 330, and then I got the formal quote. Just in steel, I can tell you, I did bring it. I was told not to share it with anybody because he's quoting some other people out there or whatever, but just in the steel alone is 109,000. It's 267,000 pounds in rebar, just in rebar. The concrete pump itself is $61,000 to have a concrete pump out there for the day. Yeah, so there was a lot of it cost. When I was first verbally told about this cost, I was hoping to be closer into 300s, maybe max 500. But we're going to be okay. We're getting a loan to do the extension on the hangar, and we'll be able to consume some of this extra cost in that. We're going to have some room in there. So it was a shock, but we're still going to be able to move forward.
Since you mentioned the hangar expansion, do you want to elaborate on that? That's
Yeah.
legal today.
Yeah, we went through a couple different designs. Originally, the hangar was supposed to be, 145 in length. We only made it 100 feet. It went over budget, so we had to stop. It's 125 feet wide, but we're going to go ahead and go 75 feet longer, and we're going to go 145 wide. That gives us, for a 737, gives us about 10 feet of space on either side, where before we would have literally 1.5 feet on each side. And pulling it in would have been fine, but pushing it out, they have like a military hitch. I don't know if you're familiar with that on those tow bars, but they tend to move a lot, so we wouldn't have a lot of correction. So the airport is going to allow us to go a little bit bigger. And it's going to be state-of-the-art. We're having offices built in there, two stories of office space, tool rooms, cages. It's going to be pretty exciting. And that's another expense that went up on the concrete pad we weren't aware of, or I didn't take into consideration. It's going to have a water, oil separator, and evaporator. So we'll catch every piece of liquid that lands on that ramp, and it'll go to a 2,000-gallon collector, which will have a evaporator tank and everything. So it's going to be a state-of-the-art crush pad. It's going to be very, very nice. So, you got to pay. If you want something nice, you just got to pay. It's just, that's why I like formal quotes. People tell me a lot of things verbally, but I always fall off my chair when I get the formals, it seems like. Yeah, we're really wanting to get the hangar moving as soon as possible. My goal is to have it completed by October. We're getting our 145 certificate, and I cannot get that until we have a hangar door. So we're just waiting to get the green light. I've got everybody in place, and I'm just waiting for the green light from the city so we can order the steel. It's going to be 5 weeks for them to engineer and do the drawings, and then after that, it's another 5 weeks to deliver the steel. We should have our concrete foundation done by then, so I'm hoping, we can still make October to have it completed. It's going to be very nice, too. We're going to be pretty proud of it.
Isaac, who's going to be your general on the French?
We're going to use Custom Construction on this one. We're pretty much using him for, we just completed the purchase on a warehouse from Christmas by Krebs. We closed on that on the 10th of March. So we just used him to put in a road from Main Street and an apron and everything. We didn't put in all the asphalt right now, but we used him for that. He's going to be the GC on the hangar, and he's also going to be the one doing the crush pad. I'm hoping we can form up the foundation for the hangar and the crush pad, maybe save a little money on the concrete pump, and you have to have this big extravagant screed thing to pull concrete. So instead of having them come in twice and hit me for $60,000 each time, I'm hoping we can maybe do them both in 1 week. So I am still trying to work on getting some of these numbers down, but we really need to make sure everybody's on board and satisfied, and then we can get everything scheduled and going to town.
So, Mark, with the significant increase, at least estimates, in costs for that, has anybody else indicated they're wanting to put a pad out there, or is that in a stop condition right now?
My understanding, there's other people that are also getting quotes from Brandon for a crunch pad separate of this one.
Or that sure excludes the city from wanting to invest in a crunch pad, doesn't it?
Well, and the city's position was if nobody was willing to step up, we would. So the
Yeah,
point
but-
of
but it-
Isaac being here is to let you know that we do have people interested in investing their money.
Okay. What I'm saying is that at 800,000, or maybe double what we thought it was gonna be, the city's not gonna be very participatory, I would think.
Probably not at this moment.
We'll see. If it's coming in already, there's no need, but if it went away, we could look at options.
The one thing I forgot to mention a minute ago is that our parking fees, because of all the aircraft, are still very high. So we do have extra revenue coming in that we had not expected a year ago. So that may play into this too in the future. But May's parking fees were $159,000, where the normal is about $40,000 to $45,000. So, that helps us out a lot on these type of projects. As well as the landing fees also were about 5 times normal. They were $5,466. So for now, we're not in a bad spot.
So the air cell crunch pad that's gonna go away by the end of the year, and they're one of the additional entities that's looking to obviously build one down there, have they said anything in reference to these costs?
Not to us.
Scott, is that something we need to be concerned about since their crunch pad goes away by the end of the year?
Yeah. We will make sure we take care of them one way or another.
Custom Construction already takes care of them, because all their crushing is
Right.
there. So he's pretty confident that if they do not build one, that they will, we'll be working. They'll still be working with custom construction, obviously a small piece. Air cell is still working with custom construction, just on our pad instead of this. That's our plan. Nothing's in writing or firm yet. Custom construction is pretty confident that if they do not build it, that we won't have a problem. I just want to make sure that they are taken care of. And us, any other, make sure we make this fair treatment.
Anything else? Commissioners? Yep.
That's all I've got.
All righty. Let's move on to item number 6.
Good morning. Concerning the Job Corps site at 57 G Street, we did contact General Services Administration, ask them what the status is, and they provided us with an answer very quick. GSA is still waiting for Health and Human Services to receive and review the applications from the interested parties. Remember, there were 3 of them that submitted to do something, 3 separate proposals. One of them the last one has a deadline of August 4th, and so everything is on hold until that time, and so we're just kind of waiting to see what their decision is for that particular piece of property. So,
Okay. Do we know who the 3 are? I think you've told us before, but let's
yes. There are 3 entities. The first one was the Studio of Hope Corporation, Teen Challenge of New Mexico, and the Roswell Homeless Coalition. They're actually the one that's due on the 4th of August. And
Okay.
so I think, you know, the question, maybe one of the things that we could start to do here is maybe to start possibly a concept plan for that particular piece of property, start laying things out. We've talked about various uses from you guys over last time we were out here. If that's of interest, I think we could probably pursue something like that, to look at some situational concept plans between now and next month. That's something that you'd be interested in.
So now, let me make sure I understand. So GSA will take no action until they hear from Health and,
Health and Human Services.
Health and Human Services, the feds, and that point, they will either accept or reject, or do they then make it, give us an option to make an offer?
I think that in our discussions, I think we are allowed, it'll depend on the situation. If they think that one of them is particularly viable as an option, I think that we're kind of more frozen out at that point. But I think that as this gets towards the end, I think we are going to be allowed to be involved and have a proposal that would be available to them from our side. As Mark and I were talking, I thought it was kind of unfair. We started the process. We paid for the legal description, the plat, and then other people get to jump in without any cost to them and kind of swoop in. So it just, I would think that it would be in a better position to have some concept plan of our own long-term when it comes to that time for our plans. And so that's why I'm saying maybe start the process. We've got a little bit of time to think about what possibly you might want on that 12 or 13 acres.
Okay. That's always been kind of open-ended, at least for me. Commissioners, does anybody want to throw out some ideas on usage of this property, or staff? Do you guys have any? I'd like us to kind of, if we're going to brainstorm, let's brainstorm.
I think that we've all talked about possibly long-term parking, a hotel complex on that site possibly. If the Tulip site is not viable, they are probably getting close to the end of their time frame in which to submit something. Possibly other types of associated, or even plain office. There are a whole group of people, I never knew this, but there's a whole group of people, pilots, that actually like to, they work in an office environment, they like to be out at the airport. There may be some other compatible types of uses like that. We could explore that, but clearly the hotel, I think I've heard that come up several times here. Clearly the parking, combined long-term hotel parking scenario, a restaurant, small eatery kind of thing. But those are the kind of scenarios that we could draw up and bring back and see if any of them really click with y'all. Start the process.
All right, you guys are in the business. What do you guys think?
Bill, to put a hotel out there, and the acreage on that site is, what, a little over 8 acres? Is that what it is?
It's about 13, I believe.
13 acres.
Okay.
And a hotel of any size, 60 to 80 rooms, 3-story, which is pretty typical, that needs ballpark 3 to 3.5 acres with parking for something.
I would say that the Home 2 down here is a 70 or 80 room, and it's a 3-story vertical, and it's on less than, it's half a city block.
Okay,
And so it's what, an acre and a half?
so 3 to 3.5 acres is more than plenty
That would be plenty.
for a hotel.
That'd be a lot.
So that still leaves 10 acres ballpark.
Mhm.
With what we know is potentially going to go on out there, and with things like Isaac is doing with Gen Air and what Air Sale is doing, I mean, I guess you can start on some concept stuff, but the likelihood, based on everything we know, to put a hotel out there is probably pretty slim right now.
Well, I always say that, I mean, that it may be today, but it's better to have anticipated a possible use out there, and instead of regretting that you didn't do that, and now you'd like to have one out there. And it's just an idea is to start reserving certain points. Yes, sir. I'm sorry. And so the idea is just to lay it out in a bubble diagram at this point. We're not saying that it's going to be home to going out there or
Sure.
anything. But the idea is to start to lay out how you'd like to generally use the property. Maybe a lot of it could be allocated for some other purpose that we're not anticipating at this time, but I know that those are a couple of uses that we've had kicked around. So I just think that there's going to be a time when the feds are going to ask us, well, what are your thoughts on what do you guys want on this property? And it's going to come up faster, sooner than later. And so, not saying, well, I think it'd be better, we'd be in a better position to be able to say, here's what our thoughts are. There's a reason we put this application in here. This is what we want to do. It fits with our long-term generally. And it doesn't have to be precise, but go through the exercise.
Is there a benefit, and Scott and Mark can maybe jump in here, is there a benefit to asking the major partners that we've got out there that are doing aircraft MRO stuff? Is there a benefit to asking them from a warehousing standpoint, just seeing what their thoughts are on warehousing? Everybody's consistently saying that warehousing is problematic, and the warehouses that we've got out there are 60-plus years old that aren't readily usable, not as functionally usable. So a modern warehouse facility that would be pretty proximate to the MROs that we've got out there, I would think that needs to at least be talked about.
Well, we do have one warehouse that's ready to go out there with ramp access. It's about 420,000 square feet, the Millennium Building. So we do have a warehouse out there. It's whether or not we can get somebody to buy it, whether it's a city that buys it, or whether it's an investor that wants to be in an opportunity zone and defer some money and pick that up. So we've seen activity on that building for warehousing, jet engine shops, those type of things, back shops for upholstery work. So I think there is an opportunity there that it's a turnkey solution that has good access and it's a good building. As far as putting a warehouse in that location directly across the terminal, I think we've discussed that before, where we see that as prime real estate. There's lots of places to stick a warehouse that isn't front and center of the air center. We've done some surveys with different customers we have out there, like DOT. They run a training program out there, and they have people from all over the state that come to the air center and train for a week at a time. They use probably about 1,100 room nights themselves just for the DOT training over a course of a year. ILEA is probably around 1,200 room nights by themselves. The people that are coming in working for Air Sale under contract, when they've expanded their workforce, are all living in some sort of temporary housing throughout the city. So they have 100 people that are staying somewhere on the local economy right now that would probably like to stay in extended suite type arrangement close to their work. the college. So we have a lot of folks that do have a demand for temporary housing. So it may not just be one-night stays for people who want to get into town and overnight at the airport hotel and walk across the street, catch their plane, which we have lots of interest in that as well, especially since we're trying to draw people in from the region, not just Roswell, to fly out of the air center. So it's up to those developers to, do their due diligence, figure out if the business works. But I think that would be an ideal location for them to be.
And I think that's the important thing. This piece is very unique in that it sits at the entrance to your terminal. I mean, you can't get any closer to your terminal entrance than this piece here. And so, but we also have lots of other properties that are available for future development for warehouse. We do have properties that are available in different places. And so a warehouse could be here, it could be there, but trying to save at least the front half of this piece, I think for the type of uses that Mark's describing here, I think would be prudent, or at least to consider. Be able to have that placement, reserve it. And if it never comes to fruition, fine. If it does, super. You've got a place ready for it.
I think Commissioner Burris wanted to jump in here.
Yes, thank you.
Make sure your microphone's on.
Yeah, get the button on here. I prefer pretty much everything you talked about. Long-term parking, motel, offices, places for the pilots. The corporate guys coming in, they need a place to stay. And if I remember correctly, aren't we still working with the military corridors and training for F-16s and things like that? We're only looking at altitudes. So their site selectors come in and they are looking for a place to stay. And you always, parking lots are probably the least expensive, but if you're going to draw in business, even if until they get their stuff built, they need a place to stay and eat. And so really, if you're going to plat it out and send it to the feds to try to develop, I would see what would fit on that chunk of dirt and pick them off as we can. That's my suggestion.
By the way, I'm getting text messages from Her Highness, the city clerk. Make sure we speak loudly into the microphones. She is monitoring us
How does she do that?
remotely. So
Scary.
it is.
Scary.
It's like God. God is watching, also known as Mrs. Call. Here's, I think what I'm taking away from what Bill's saying here is that we want to submit to the GSA a concept, not something we're locked into, but to say to GSA, this property should come to the Air Center because we have these potential uses for it, or we're looking at these uses. But we're not committed to doing any of these things. Just to kind of reiterate, I started this endeavor, 3 years ago, I think it was, with the letter to Job Corps, with the idea that this chunk of property is just sitting there doing nothing and has no potential. If we get it into the Air Center's hands, then there's the potential for development. So I think what I'm hearing, Bill, is that let's put a little concept, let the inner artist and you go wild and do the hotel and then do an industrial/office complex on the other 10 acres that Commissioner Kunkel was pointing out. And we say to the GSA, this is what we would like to accomplish, understanding we don't have the money for it right now, or something to that effect. But it would look more desirable for the development of the Air Center. And Scott, does the FAA have any say in this too? Because they want to develop aviation. And so I was wondering if they will be able to say something to GSA.
So they really don't. I mean, quite honestly, unless we purchase it with airport revenue, they don't have any say in that part of it, what the land would be used for. And if it were purchased with general fund revenue, then they only have a review of the height of the buildings and those type of things about the aeronautical side of it. Of course, they would prefer that you're going to do things that are airport related as much as possible close to the airport. But they don't mind if you have an electric motor factory across the street.
Would they be willing to offer like a letter of support?
Probably not.
No. Okay. Fair enough. All right, Jim?
One more. I just snapped. We're always talking about traffic and logistics and what we're going to do with people, and I know we've had some restraints on our terminal. But if we're going to think about putting a motel, parking, some of these are business offices across the street there on 13 acres, there might be a chance to relocate some of our rent-a-car businesses off-site and free up some space there. Just a thought, because that's right next to the terminal and in the terminal, and it's tight right now, and obviously you want more flights, so maybe they can have an office over there and you take that section off the ramp side. That's just a thought.
Okay. Well, what about this idea? How about if, Bill, you came back in August with some concept stuff that we could say, send to GSA, because GSA is giving this, the one advocacy group has got until early August to respond, so if we have something that we submit, do we want to do it after, or do we need to do it before?
I think that you'll have time in August. I mean, there's that's just the deadlines for these guys to even turn things in. It'll take them time to review them. But in the meantime, I think that'll give y'all a chance to digest and kind of consider, some of these ideas, and formalize them a little bit more in your own head about what you would like to see out there on that 13 acres. So.
Okay. I'm not committed to the hotel idea. I'm just saying we put something on paper that we send to GSA, and if we do I think the hotel makes something that would be something they would see at a air center would make sense, and industrial office space, warehouse space. I just want us to get our hands on that 13 acres. That's from my perspective, that's the objective here, so that we have it as an option to develop in the future.
Absolutely.
Because right now, we've got no opportunities. So, anybody, go ahead, James.
One more. This question's for Bill.
Okay.
At the end of the day, if I remember correctly, even if they have a proposal, we still have to go through planning and zoning. Is that correct?
At this point, no. I mean, it's got the industrial zoning that's already on there.
Okay.
There's going to be some point where, I'll be honest, I don't think we've ever done a site plan out at the airport. You guys, the airport's kind of its own entity out
Right.
there. It does have zoning overlay because it is part of the city,
Right.
but it's treated differently if you're if it's airport property, inside the gate.
I guess, let me rephrase that. Zoning and plat work and all that kind of stuff has not actually been finalized.
No, not yet at this point.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so unless there's some different ideas, Bill comes back in August with what we would propose to GSA as the Roswell Air Center usage of this 13 acres.
And I'll probably come back with like 3 or 4, obviously, some different configurations, just to kind of
Okay.
mix things up. So,
All right.
all right.
Anything else? All right, moving on to item number 7. All right, Scott. What did I do with it?
So on the handouts that you guys have in front of you on the minimum standards, I think I covered it a bit in my email to you. But what I've done is I went through a few different airports that had minimum standards, and quite honestly, they're all very similar even to our old minimum standards. A lot of it's different arrangement, and they're all drawing every bit of what they have in those minimum standards from that AC that I shared with you before last month's meeting. So really, it comes down to what you want it to look like, how readable it is, other specific things that you want for your airport. So what I've done is I picked Durango's, thanks to Kevin for sending that to me and AvFlight, and modified it because I like the technical layout that we have. It's much easier to read. It's easy to reference sections because they're all numbered. A lot of what Durango had is in there still and was very much the same as what we had. But I rearranged a bit over the original. And then since Amy couldn't be here at this meeting, we had a phone conversation and went over what she thought would be appropriate changes. And that's what you see in the red line. So with that, the mayor was talking about going through this line by line, and that's probably a good idea. I'll stand for your comments.
Why don't we just start?
Start with one?
Yeah.
So first of all, ignore the table of contents because it's going to change. Right now, the pages don't line up with everything because of the red line. And once we finish making changes and accept all the changes, those pages may change, so don't worry about that. The one thing on that I took out was section 13 altogether because it really was just hanging there out of place, and so moved it into section 3. Do you want to go over Amy's or just see what everybody else has? What do you think? We can go line by line.
Well, I was thinking, let's
We'll just start and go line by line, see any comments?
let's see if, how about this? It's a little bit daunting. How about we go with Ms. Call's, the other Ms. Call's, comments, and maybe that'll spark some
Okay.
comments or questions about anything else.
Okay, most of the changes that we made were wordsmithing type of things. There was a little bit of structural change that, like I said, where we moved all of section 13 into section 3 because it made sense. But as we go through it, you'll see what those were. So we'll start with section 1.12, and one of the things that I had to go through and change from Durango's was they referred to licenses a lot because their government structure is different up there. It's a county and city-owned airport, and they had airport-specific business licenses. So we don't do that. We have a business license within the city that we require people to do, so we don't do airport licenses. So when we start looking at how we do permission agreements for businesses on the airport, they're all going to be operating agreements or leases. So, or some other, maybe a use agreement, an oddball type of thing. But they're all going to be some sort of written agreement that we go with. So I took licenses out completely, and that's where we're starting with 1.2. We removed the term license, and then we put, I put the word business vehicles in there because we're talking about business vehicles versus personal vehicles. Any comments? And then 1.16, same thing. That also was just a change to take out the license term on commercial general liability. 1.19 was added as a response to another change that we made where it was talking about, well, the one above it, where it talks about entities. It included natural persons in 1.18. And we took that out of entity and made another line for an individual, so that entity is literally that. It's a company, a corporation, a partnership, that type of thing, and an individual is an individual. That's the lawyer stuff.
Okay.
1.17, we just removed unnecessary language for the no compensation paid. 1.26, because that was the license issue, we removed that definition altogether. 1.29, another license issue, just to cleaning up that language. And just stop me if you guys have a comment. 1.34, same thing, the entity versus individual issue, clarified that. On 2.01, clarified some language for written agreements versus licenses, and then I've got highlighted also I didn't know if I wanted to use this wording or if you guys might have something better, or maybe we talked to Parker about that, but how we refer back to basically the authority that this document comes from. So I referred it back to the council without referring to the ordinance, but what do you think?
Well, this is not in an ordinance,
Correct.
so,
But as we go through this, you've got your little sheet there that Aaron made that has the colors, and we're looking at the different pieces.
Yeah.
And when we piece it all together, we're going to have the ordinances, and then we'll have the minimum standards, we'll have the general rules, we'll have the fee schedule, and all of those things will be different pieces of the whole. And so as we go through, and the property management. So as we go through those documents, they will refer to each other. One of the things that we'll be doing as we go through the minimum standards is there are some things in our property management document that really should be in minimum standards, and once we get this clarified, we'll go back and clean up that document as well so that they don't conflict. The property management document needs a review periodically anyway, so as we make these all mesh, they should refer to each other. But I don't know if anybody has any problem with us referring to the authority of the governing body as the source of authority for this document.
well, the reality is that every agreement out
Correct.
there has to be sanctioned by the governing body.
Correct. That's why I didn't refer to the ordinance yet. I wanted to get your
Yeah.
opinion on that.
So that's my thoughts. Anybody else? No. So it's, I think, appropriate to go ahead, and I like how you did leases, permits, other written agreements shall require compliance with minimum standards. So, yes, everything falls under the
Right.
governing body.
Okay. Very good.
Okay?
A little further down, you see red line and may be exceeded, just excessive language. The discussion there was, okay, these are minimum standards. Of course they can be exceeded. We just didn't feel like that needed to be stated.
Sure.
2.02, another cleanup of licensed and unlicensed type of thing. That basically would have referred to something that we as the airport would license a product particularly to be used on the airport. So we felt like unauthorized was good enough because we're not doing licenses for particular things like that. 3.02, that is the old section 13 that was added back into the middle. It made sense to put that in line with the rest of the general requirements as to how you go about establishing your business on the airport, rather than being at the end. It just included the application process. And it mentions an application there, I think I called it, I have to look for it, commercial aeronautical activity, anyway, an application for a commercial aeronautical business. That document still needs to be created, but it basically is just a information gathering document so that people can put, the name of the company, the principals, whatever information we determined that we need. And we have something like that already that's really old that probably needs to be updated, but we'll probably draw from that. And it would basically just be someplace that we would gather information. If we agree that their business is great, then, we'll use that as we set up our accounts with billing and those things.
All right, now, this specifically talks about commercial aeronautical activities, so we're not even going to address non-aeronautical
No.
here, like the shredding,
minimum-
shredding company and what?
Correct. Minimum standards only address aeronautical.
Okay.
So
So
the whole document refers to aeronautical.
Like Jen Air or Avflight
Yeah.
or?
Yep, Flight, any of them.
Yeah, okay,
If we had a flight school come in, we do have one on, but it would apply to them. If we have somebody who rents airplanes or sells airplanes, all those things are included in here.
okay. Questions?
Moving on to 3.05
Commissioner
paragraph.
Kunkel had a question on this one.
I'm sorry?
While you're going through that, the addresses that you've got here, I know that's where the airport admin office is today, and I also know where City Hall is. But if we just put Roswell City Hall or the airport admin office, no addresses, everybody's gonna know where that is.
Sure, I don't have any problem with that.
Yeah, I just, because if those things change, then you gotta put a new address in there.
Okay. So just on that first paragraph, end it with airport administrative offices or on, well, do you want to take off the online? Because that could change too. Your website could change. This is probably easier than your physical address. You just say,
I would like to be able to refer to online if we, maybe if the web page address changes, that's an
Okay.
issue. And I say that because we're moving more and more, into that
Okay.
electronic age, and a lot of our documents are already online. And so, I'd like to be able to refer to that in some way. It doesn't necessarily have to be the address, but that's convenient.
and the commercial business license that can be obtained online too, I believe.
Yeah, and I think that is in here somewhere.
So, yeah, it does. So it's say.
Yeah, it is.
All right, so
It
you want to
is.
just tweak that a little bit? Okay.
Now, Bud's talking about, 421 North Richardson, that would be the City Hall Annex. My question there is, okay, are we worried about whether that address changes? I mean, because offices within the city sometimes move to other buildings, so probably should just name the office, the clerk's office.
The Roswell City Clerk's office.
Yeah.
Just wherever that
The
is.
city
Wherever
clerk
that
doesn't
is.
do
Yeah,
business
because-
license, shouldn't do
because
the
you're
business
right.
license, so.
Probably they're gonna get it online.
Yeah,
But if they need to go
Yeah.
talk to somebody, just go to the Roswell City Clerk's office.
yep,
And you're gonna tell them that. if they-
yes, I am.
Yeah, so.
Okay, perfect.
All right. Okay.
Let me catch up. Okay, so moving on to 3.05, paragraph 1, where we inserted written changes, just updating the language for changing the license language. And then 3.15 through the fence activities, we marked out at the airport because it was extra verbiage, and then we also marked out the last sentence, which explains the reason for not doing through the fence. That Amy felt that wasn't necessary. And I agree. Variance or exemption. Basically just shortening the language and to relevant information. And then in the next sentence, it talks about shall not be reasonably or unjustly discriminatory, blah, blah, blah. Honestly, that language is straight out of FAA language. That's about not being discriminatory and all of that sort of thing, so we felt like that wasn't necessary in this document, but we would just put in there what our response time was, rather than talking about the FAA language.
Okay, we say the airport in its sole discretion, meaning whom?
Good question. We could put the city, we could put the director.
That,
And that is something that actually, input on that would be good, because when you get into those type of things where you're talking about, appeals and that sort of thing, then it gets tricky.
that's what I'm thinking, because I'm thinking it should say something like the city manager or his designee, but then an appeal can be made to the governing body. That's what we've got on, like, planning and zoning, all that stuff. Those can all be appealed, condemnations, blah, blah, blah. There's always an appeal process, and ultimately then, if I'm not mistaken, they can go to district court. But I'm not sure about this type of thing, but maybe,
Now, this is asking for a variance or exemption, so, if they don't meet our minimum standards, I think we have good ground to stand on saying, no, this is an appeal to us not granting the variance or an exemption, and I think we need a fair process.
yes, and that's why I'm saying, so variance exemptions, something like the air center director or the city manager, something like that. Why don't you talk to Parker about that one?
Yeah, I agree.
Because I think there needs to be some type of, you can't just say the airport. It needs to be an identified position to make the decision, and then there needs to be an identified appeal entity that you can go to. And
Yep.
usually it ends up being the governing body.
Yeah.
Counselor Stubbs, did you want to chime in on this in any way, shape, or form? Okay.
And I have no problem making that decision, but I have no problem sharing it either.
No, I got you. And see what Parker thinks. Okay. Anybody, and that's just me, by the way. You guys disagree or different opinion?
No, Parker needs input.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, we can clean that up. Moving on to 3.18, we took the word program out because it's not a program, it's just minimum standards. 4.3 is the next one, and Commissioner Cole didn't feel that have was an appropriate word, as in having adequate land, that leasing would be more appropriate, so that's what we put.
You know, going back a little bit to 316 and 31, there's two 316s anyway, by the way. Enforcement.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, variance or exemption is a 3.16, and then enforcement is a 3.16.
Got it.
So that. And I looked back in the definitions. Airport is defined, the Roswell Air Center and all the area, blah, 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 within the interior. But then, in this area here, we're talking about, it's something that decides stuff. So I would suggest, do we define the air center director? Yes. I think you should, where it says airport here in these areas, say the air center director.
Where at?
So in both 3.16s,
Okay,
use the term air center director.
okay.
And it's like in 3.17, this may have the appeal already built in here. I haven't looked this over. But a decision of it's got to be the air center director. An airport doesn't make a decision. It's got to be a person. Air center director, when you say, and then appeal the decision to the director within 10 business days, no, I'd say they appeal to the city manager.
Okay.
And then from there to the governing body. But in this area right here, these 315 through 317, where it's referring to the airport as a decision-making entity, I think needs to be, in fact, the air center director. What do you guys?
Agree.
Agreed?
Any
Okay.
appeals then go to the
City manager.
city manager.
And then, if they don't like that, then go to the governing body.
Yep.
That way, they've got two options, two bites at the apple, and that should be plenty. That should hold up. Okay.
Okay. Let's see, we got 3.18, and we got 4.3, 4.7. Just changed the language, honestly. Just cleaned it up a little bit to change, the FBO shall have use of the following support equipment. So that it leaves it open for the FBO to own it or to lease it or to arrange with another
Okay.
entity.
Jim?
You add snow removal equipment, because you get de-ice. So you get anti-ice and de-ice fluids, two separate things, and then add snow removal. So either they have their equipment or they can lease yours. Someone has to be responsible.
So in the end, the FBO is responsible by this. They just have to,
Yeah, they don't have to own a snowplow.
Correct,
but
correct.
they have to understand that you have priorities, what you're gonna clear,
yes.
and they're down here. But it has to be in some kind of written document. So anti-ice, de-ice, and snow removal equipment. If you're gonna call out the anti-icing, there's more than one kind, and then also snow removal. Think about it.
Yeah. And Kevin, I'd love your input when we're talking about anti-icing and de-icing and that sort of thing.
So usually for like anti-icing.
Microphone.
Yeah.
You're going to get chastised.
Yeah, I'm gonna get chastised. You
Yep.
guys don't. She texts me.
Yep. You're welcome, Sharon.
So usually for airports that I've worked at, the FBO is responsible for either leasing or providing de-icing and anti-icing services. The snow removal does come from the airport because that's usually land that we lease from the airport, and the airport's responsible for clearing that area. If it's something that we were interested in clearing because, we know that the airport's priorities are obviously runways, taxiways, aircraft movement areas, and it's something that we will provide. But for the most part, it's usually dependent on the airport, and most of the time, if the airport is so far behind, nobody's leaving anyways.
My comment is, if it's gonna be minimum standards, I think that would be a minimum standard. That's all, and that's what the document's for.
No, I think it's a fair
I
discussion.
mean, you can do the rest of it in your lease agreements.
Yeah, the lease agreement makes the FBO responsible for snow removal on their leased property, as it does with any other building.
Okay.
Okay, let's see. So 4.9, the discussion there in removing that language was, it felt like we were meddling too much in Avflight or whoever's business in terms of who they hire as a manager. So we just took it out, anticipating that they know how to run their business. And so they would hire someone with the proper experience.
Okay.
In my comments, you'll see on insurance, that's just a note to double check, make sure our minimums line up with what we really require, everything else. It looks like they do, but just a double check.
Okay.
And then the next red is in 9.4. And again, that's cleaning up license into a written agreement.
Oh, yeah, the insurance throughout this whole,
Yeah, it's throughout. It's just a
Okay.
note to me to double check those. They're all the same except for, I believe the FBO is different, and so we'll double check that to make sure what we require. And then, I think we're getting close. And then one more, I don't know why it turned green, but that was another move, of moving a whole paragraph from one place to another where it made more sense in 11.1.
okay.
That was just a rearrangement. It was already in there in the document that you guys got, that I sent you. Didn't change any wording at all, just moved it from 11.7, and we did away with 11.7 and dispersed the rest under the sections and subsections that were appropriate. And then under 11.6, where it says insurance, more cleaning up of the word license and into written agreements and leases. And that is all I have that Commissioner Cole and I went through.
All right, let me throw on a thought for you. The footer, or the foot of this document, where you have Roswell Air Center minimum standards for commercial aeronautical activities, my suggestion is you add the date. So August 1,
Yeah.
2020.
Okay.
So if a page becomes separated, this document will get changed over time.
Yep.
And that way you'll know it's, which version of it is talking, even if it's a page out of the, off by itself, you'll
Yep.
know if it's the most current one or not. Just something I
That
have
is a great
tended to see.
idea.
All right. So I had a little bit of I think I understand now. You have these like aircraft maintenance operator, SASO, Special Aeronautical Service Operator.
Which section are we in?
Well, it's like sections 5, 6, you know,
Okay.
aircraft rental, is it SASO? Tell me, SASO, I assume, is a FAA term?
Yes,
I'm
it
not
is.
familiar with it.
And that's actually defined in the advisory circular. And the idea is to capture activities that are not necessarily a full-blown FBO. So if you look at a full-blown FBO and they do everything, they would potentially provide mechanic, aircraft sales, aircraft rentals, charters, flight instruction, and then line service. They would potentially provide all of those things. But being able to say SASOs gives you the ability to split those activities off into individual activities for, like air sales is SASO, because they don't provide, for example, airplane rental, but they do provide airplane maintenance.
Okay, that was going to be one of my questions. Where do outfits like air sale fall into this? Where would, or do they fall into multiple sections?
I think air sale would fall potentially in, well, they're going to fall under a aircraft maintenance operator, SASO.
Okay,
And that could be either a full Part 145, or it could be a smaller one that's not a Part 145, a general aviation mechanic, for example, who doesn't have a full repair station license. It could be either one. And then when we get down to the very end, where we were looking at, let me find that section, I think it was 11. Yeah, the others. That's where I included the aircraft demolition and long-term aircraft storage, because those are oddballs. You could have someone doing either one and not doing other services.
well,
So-
you have a section 9 that's aircraft storage operator, but that was a little wondering about that, because it doesn't seem to talk about outdoor, or maybe I'm missing it.
Now, so again, that's confusing, and it always confuses me too, honestly, because this aircraft storage as referred to here is providing hangars. So when the FAA refers to aircraft storage, they're not always referring to the outdoor storage like we do mostly. They're also referring to indoor storage. And so when we're talking about an aircraft storage operator, and it may be that we want to come up with a better term to fit our airport, I'm good with that.
Okay.
To minimize the confusion, but it's primarily hangar providers. And we could be one of those in our case of our T hangars and our other big hangars, but you know, we regulate ourselves. But it's really more for the person who comes in and rents 8 acres from me and decides to build T hangars.
Okay, so since outdoor storage is a big chunk of what we do, I guess what I'm struggling with is, does it need to go into this section, or does it need to be a section of itself? I mean, that's with the headache you guys have been dealing with more than anything
Well,
else, is the outdoor storage.
We have an operating agreement that you may
Yeah, we
want to
have an
talk
operating
about.
agreement for that, and that's mentioned in here. And I think that, I'm trying to remember, I think that's all that it says about the storage. I was looking for it.
Well, what about 9.2, adding a leased premises could also be exterior, or, I don't know, I don't know where to put this.
Sure.
I feel like if we're gonna talk about aircraft storage operator, the reality is the vast majority of it is
Outdoors.
outside.
So, and that's where the terms come from. The storage term is an FAA term versus a hangar for maintenance. So that would be maintenance, and then another hangar would be storage, and then possibly manufacturing if you had, like Boeing, we're building, or Cessna, whoever building airplanes. So those would be the different terms that would fall on the hangars, and maybe we just call the outdoor storage, the long-term storage, just call it outdoor storage. I don't know. Maybe we need to invent a term.
Yeah, my mind's going blank here. Anybody else want to jump in?
Has Parker reviewed this?
No.
Will he?
Yes.
You might ask him about
Okay.
that, how the best way to
Okay.
do that.
Let me ask a question real quick, Scott.
Go ahead, Jim.
I just have a question here. You know, we're talking about storage of aircraft inside, outside. Somewhere in here, someone has to have a capabilities list on how to work on these airplanes. Does that move the responsibility under their directive? So I mean, like, I'm going to work on a 757. I got to have a hangar that fits in. I can stick it outside and work on it, but I don't get a license unless there's a hangar somewhere. Anywhere in the airport, right? So if I'm going to accept your aircraft, you just brought it to me, it's going to be downgraded. I'm not going to put passengers on it. So, and essentially, once you take it out of service, it's my airplane, correct, until I return it to service. So storing it is my responsibility, and that's going to fall underneath my lease agreement. Is that correct?
Lease agreement or operating agreement, and then when you talk about the different services, the different activities in here, you'll see that it also refers to the particular certification that everybody should have, and the proper regulations, FAA regulations, that sort of thing.
I'm just trying to help you with definitions here on if I'm going to put the airplane inside or outside.
Right.
FBO, you know, the feds are saying if I'm going to rent space, the weather's going bad, I'm going to land, I'm going to ask him if he has a hangar to put my airplane in. That's different than storing an airplane outside.
Right, and I think you're referring to work for what's required inside and what's required or allowed outside.
These types of things.
Yeah, and
Maybe that'll help you with your storage definitions.
yeah, it may. But
I just thought I'd throw that out.
no, perfect. I don't know. I mean, you know from working for so long with that stuff that it can be pretty squirrely. So I don't know if we find anything, but it's worth looking. You never know. Experienced.
Bud, did you have something you want?
Well, I'm concerned as you are, I think, about the city and all the story down there. But, this is here.
No, I don't think it applies to the city.
I just feel like we're missing a special air service operator category that is our dominant one.
I wouldn't have a problem separating it, but it would be a very short section because most of the specifics are covered in the operating agreement, and quite honestly, it's like a 5 or 6 page agreement. We don't want to put all that in here, and you know, once we refer to, and again, this can be expanded if there's something I'm missing. I mean, I wrote this, so right off the top of my head of what the requirements would be. And mostly, I'm just looking at my concerns, and then the rest of it's covered in the agreement.
So, I think part of my struggle is I don't like the title for Section 9, because I'm like, and I don't have a good term, but I'm going to throw one out here, aircraft housing operator. And that's not a good term, I get it, but what I'm trying to differentiate here is that, because, you know, like you say, somebody comes in, wants to lease 1536 to keep their planes in it, or Mitsubishi shows up, or whatever. But what goes on out there with the aircraft storage is that it's not just storage. I mean, those planes get checked, you have engine run-ups, you do stuff to them, so maybe it falls more under a term like, I don't know, long-term secure storage, exterior storage,
Mayor, if I could,
maintenance and storage.
if I could point you to section 11, page 28.
Okay.
So other specialized aeronautical service operator,
Yeah.
limited aircraft services and support. This is where we talk about engine, accessory services and support,
Right.
long-term aircraft storage, aircraft demolition, and then the paragraph underneath that talks about long-term aircraft storage.
Right.
Operators must enter an operating agreement with the city, and within that operating agreement that we have currently is where we kind of dictate what they need to do.
Right. And that's why I put it under the limited aircraft services. That was already a piece of this, but I just expanded it to include our long-term storage program so that it would mention the operating agreement and talk about VOD and those type of things just briefly. And so if you have someone who's operating out there, like American, for example, that's all they do on our airport. You know, they have X number of airplanes out there, and that's exactly what they do, is they store them long-term on our airport. AirSail, on the other hand, has a Part 145, and they do long-term storage, but they also do aircraft maintenance. Dean Baldwin, on the other hand, not really storage. You know, short time, you know, a couple of days parking is all they do when they're shuffling airplanes. So it's kind of the ability to do an a la carte business and pick these services, and then you have the standards that apply to them. And then, of course, at the very bottom, you have the catch-all that says if there's a standard we didn't think of, you know, we can make it up as we go based on the needs.
Okay. I'm not, you know, this is a document that the Air Center creates to share with customers and potential customers. So I'm not going to dig my heels in on any of this, because I think it's got to be a tool for you guys, and so you can hand it out and refer to it. So
And I would suggest that we might be able to find a better term for the outdoor storage, but in Section 9, that's commonly referred to that way within the
That's the
FAA and
industry.
aviation world. It's just the different uses of a hangar, such as, like I said, maintenance or storage or manufacturing or that type of thing.
Okay. Anyone else want to jump in here? Counselor Stubbs, do you have any comments, concerns, questions? Well, clarification here. This document does not go to the legal committee or the governing body. This will be created and is subject to final approval by the city manager, but that's as far as it goes. So this would be, what we figured, this is the yellow section?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so it's the yellow section of the Holloman chart, for want of a better term.
I like it.
That being said, and Counselor Stubbs, I'm going to drag you into this, so come on up to a microphone.
You want to use this one?
Yeah, you might want to use that one. Go ahead.
Sorry.
Because on The agenda, tentative agenda for July is the action on ordinances 4 and 5 changes. That's the blue and the green in the Holloman chart, and the resolution on fees, which legal has had now for a while. So what I want the commission to understand what the route of all this is that these things on the blue, the green, and the salmon colored, red, whatever, it goes to the governing body for approval after review by legal. The other two are internal documents. Now, the orange we don't have yet, is that correct, Scott?
That's the regulations
Okay, but we have the yellow. So my thinking is that when this goes to the council, July 9th, the ordinances are already on the agenda. We've already announced that we will have a public hearing and vote. We also should vote on the resolution at the same time and briefly let the council know of the minimum standards so that the council as a governing body can put it in context. Am I wrong? I mean, Counselor, what are you thinking of?
No, I agree with what you've just said. I mean,
Okay.
I don't know what you really want from
Well, I want to
me,
make sure
but
we
it's
all
in
understand where we're
motion.
going.
It's all already in motion, correct?
Yes. Yeah,
So,
I just want, is the resolution, did you guys already vote on the resolution?
that I can't recall. I don't think we have.
I don't think you have either, but it's not on today's agenda
No.
either.
So that will not be heard in July.
Well, would you object to me putting it on the July city council agenda
With
without
no
it going?
recommendation then?
Yeah, we just say that you've had it, you've had to look at it, but you haven't taken action on it.
Yes, and needs to be an action item, not a consent item, I would
Correct.
think, with no recommendation, but that's fine. If you wanna
Because
get
I want
this
to,
all
what I'm getting is I
together
want to
at
make a
once.
complete
Yeah.
package.
Yes.
So we don't, so the council's not, well, what is all this? No, it's all one thing, and we even discussed it all at one time, so that the council as a whole knows what's going on. Let's check with Parker on that and make sure we can add that, and I'll check with Joe, too. And then,
That's agreeable with me personally.
Okay.
Yes.
and, okay.
So-
Commissioners, any other thoughts? So this is still subject to, we're going to bring this back after the tweakings in July, at which time, not that you don't have anything to do, but what about the last part?
I will give it my best effort.
Okay, that's fine.
I'm hoping it won't be too bad. I mean, it's a long section, but most of the rules that we have in there will continue much the same way and just get updated. So I'm hoping it won't be too bad, but like I said, I will make my best effort at it.
Okay.
Just remember, I'm a one-man band.
You got Massey.
You don't want Massey doing that.
All right.
Sorry, Scott.
All right, Commissioners, any objection to what I just suggested for Mr. Stark about coming back with this next month?
I agree.
Okay. This actually is going along smoother and faster than I anticipated.
We still get lunch?
Yeah, we still have lunch today, which is good because I didn't have breakfast. So, the minimum standards. And we're talking about item 8 here. Also, so did Morris, did I understand Morris to say he'd be willing to volunteer up something at next month? So
Yeah.
on the Job Corps property?
That's what I heard, and if it,
Yeah, he said August.
But he was saying, didn't he say he would bring something? Yeah. All right, then we don't need to worry about it then. Other topics for July?
Update on the crush pads.
Yeah, good idea. Crush pad.
Not just update, but insurance that Air Sale and everybody else out there is going to be reasonably happy with what's going on.
I think that's a good point. Let's see if we can get Air Sale, maybe Randy or somebody over here for that. Okay. The air service situation, do you want to, let's talk about that some more. Oh, I have a question for the commission here too, okay? We had a little bit of a glitch here and moved our meeting back to the 25th of June. The third Thursday in July is the 16th, which is pretty quick. But July has 5 Thursdays. So what would you guys think of going to the 23rd of July? Then the third Thursday of August is the 20th. So it would be kind of on a 4-week centers. Okay. Anybody else? Scott, that work for you?
Yeah,
That
it
gives
does.
you an extra week too to get some things sorted out. Let's talk about staffing at the Air Center. Okay? So by that point, maybe you can have some updates, maybe even some new people you could introduce. And anything else, counselors? Anybody? Counselor Stubbs? Come on in. No, come on in. This is not like a council meeting. This is a lot less formal, so.
I appreciate that. No, Mr. Chair, I'm just thinking of the 23rd of July. I don't have my phone or calendar with me, but I think that's same day as legal. This makes this kind of tough for us. And I thought the budget
Oh,
special
crap.
meeting is that afternoon. I
It
mean, I'm
is.
just thinking of the drain on.
Hey, what the heck? We're here
Resources.
from dusk to dawn, from
Well,
dawn to dusk.
If that's what we want,
We could do that.
you can buy the pizza.
I'll buy the pizza. Dion's. Is it Dion?
Yeah.
Okay, I keep screwing up the name. I want to call it Diane's. No, there wasn't. Yeah, you're right. It does make it for a full day, but I think it works well for us. So let's leave it at, unless there's some other compelling issues. All right. Do we have any public participation? We have all kinds of folks here. Not really. Final thought is, I haven't discussed this with everyone yet, but I am wondering or hoping that by August, we can move back to the Air Center for these.
You got my vote.
Yeah, I figured
Not
I
that-
would.
Not that I get a vote.
Yeah, well, we'll see. The governor's got a press conference at 3, so this is a very tentative concept. We'll see where we're at.
Yeah.
We can discuss that next month. Didn't want to get ahead of the game, but Yeah, it really would. Oh, and there's another thought too. Not in July, obviously, but maybe in August. Do another tour. Where we get on the bus and drive around and look at stuff. The wisdom of Commissioner Armstrong. He is spot on. Good point. Thank you, sir. We'll shoot for September or even October. Yeah, that's good. That's a good point. Yeah, by that time we can go look at these sites and we'll see some other stuff in the works. All right, anything else? Anybody? Going once, going twice? All right, I've got 11:35. This is spooky quick. So we're adjourned.